Welcome to the Whitetail Legacy Podcast.
Tomorrow is opening day.
This morning, didn't have a great hunt. Deer didn't move like usual.
We just got set up in the middle of this bedding thicket. We've been saving this spot from the rut. I think it's a nice buck.
Boom! Hits a 170.
That was money. I think he's down right over there, maybe 10 yards.
Whitetail Legacy Podcast, bringing you back to the hunt and leaving a legacy.
Baller rut.
Welcome to the Whitetail Legacy Podcast. We hope you guys had a great Christmas. Got to spend some time with your family and friends. This will be releasing on Christmas,
On
right?
Christmas.
I know, so it's pretty epic. I don't think we're going to get a lot of listeners on Christmas.
It's like the worst day of the year.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Thursday. They're listening Thursday,
Yeah.
And that's why I wish them, hope they had a good Christmas.
First time this year, Prime Rib Day will be on Thursday.
Yeah, I
we'll
know.
move it.
Yeah, we'll move it. But yeah, we've released on Wednesday every episode for the last 2 years, and we're not going to change it. Wednesday at 11 is when Prime Rib comes out. So, but we hope you had a good Christmas. This week we got Brian Rogers on, breaking down some public land tactics. This guy absolutely had an incredible year on public. It's been hunting public for decades, so it's pretty cool that he's out there getting it done on deer consistently and some really big deer also. Does whatever it takes to get done. A lot of good tactics in here. Moving when you need to, really thinking about access with the wind. I mean, just too many to list, but let's get into the people that make this possible and get into the show. You got the VIP Veteran Broadhead shout out?
Yeah, this week's shout out is Bryce Williams. He was in the Air Force for 8 years, and he said he just wants to be remembered as a guy who did his duty.
Oh,
so
nice.
I was like,
That's
man, just
pretty
another
cool.
solid guy
Yeah.
out there. So we appreciate your service, man, and sacrificing them 8 years. I was just thinking, I've been able to legally drink for 8 years. Like, that's a long time.
Yeah, it feels like a long time. Yeah.
It's a chunk of life.
Yeah, it is.
So we appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate it, man. Hopefully you get to spend some time with your family. A big shout out to all the military people that are listening to this that can't hang out with your family.
Yeah.
We appreciate you guys. If there's anyone out there listening, we know this has got to be a rough time for you guys, but just a heartfelt thank you from the Whitetail Legacy guys and the VIP brand and family. Little bit about VIP Veteran Broadhead. We're going to be at ATA releasing the Combat Veteran. Come by, check us out. Do you have a booth number yet?
I don't.
Okay, well, we'll get a booth number, and if there's anybody out there that wants to come by and chit-chat and meet us, feel more than welcome to come by and say hi. We like to listen or reach out to our listeners and talk to them. It's crazy when you go to an event like that and people actually do come up. You're like,
Yeah.
whoa.
We talked to a lot of people last year right out in front of the VIP booth. So
Yeah, a lot of people come up and talk to us, so we were like, wow, So it's cool that our little podunk show can reach out there and listen to people and make it, get us some friends, people that we talked to before that we felt like we already met.
Yeah.
We got to actually meet there. So let's get into Embry Custom Woodworkings. Out and Gander Outdoors. He was just on the radio station.
Yeah, he was.
Did you listen to that?
I tried,
Yeah.
but my wife's grandma said she heard it.
Oh, nice. Yeah. He gave us a solid shout out. So shout out to Jeff on that. Going to be able to pick up his double-sided and triple-sided turkey calls in Gander Outdoors, so that's huge for him. He did get approved for the outdoor 3D range.
Nice.
So that's coming. So I'm excited about that. Big things going for him. He deserves it, man. 22 years in the Navy. That's a lifetime. I bet it felt like for him. You know what I mean? And then his son going right into like surveillance. Like I don't even know what the word is, but he's in like terrorist surveillance. I mean, going from your dad doing it for 22 years and you just signing up right away. That whole entire family. Shout out to them because they're doing a lot for all of us. Ingram's Outdoor Obsession. I asked him, man. He said not a lot of bucks coming in. It's been short on the bucks.
I'm gonna say
But
we're through muzzleloader.
I know we've been talking to a lot of people, and I don't know anybody that shot one with the muzzleloader. I don't know anyone that's put one down late season.
Matt.
And Matt. Yeah, Matt did. Yeah, that's the only person I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Matt from Last Breath shot a great buck they called Fade. They just released episodes, and check it out there. But yeah, there's not a lot of guys that are killing deer, man. And I'm talking to a lot of people that are still trying, you know, and we're still trying, but it just ain't happening. What else we got? Scentlock, all your ozone and hunting clothing needs. All right, let's get into the show. All right, we got Brian Rogers on. Appreciate you coming on and giving us some knowledge of public land because we need it and we struggled last year.
What's up, guys? How's it going?
Not much, just out here in the studio. Good to be podcasting again. Feels like it's been a while.
Yeah, right.
Christmas season's just so insanely busy for us. Try to get out in the woods if we can, but it's cool just to be doing something hunting for a change and talking hunting.
Yeah, I agree, man. Once after about second shotgun, man, it always becomes almost impossible for me to do anything between making up work and putting in more time with the family and all that stuff. It almost seems like my season ends on the last day of shotgun season. So
yeah, I think that's kind of how we are too. We've been hunting, but it's not near as much as we were before. You know, just like every weekend you got a Christmas party, wife's work Christmas party, kids Christmas party. You're like, man, just 82 Christmas parties I gotta go to. But
I agree, man. And I get a muzzleloader tag every year, and I'm lucky to get out, you know, a morning or an afternoon at all. So
yeah,
I'm saying, and then the days are 4:45. If it's cloudy, it's dark. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's getting dark early. So, all right, well, give the listeners a brief introduction of who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, like you said, my name's Brian Rogers. I grew up here in the middle in the Midwest here in Springfield. I actually work at a Chrysler Jeep dealership is what I do for work. I farmed for a long time before I did that. But then when my daughter was coming along, I had to find something where I could, you know, have a little bit more time and energy with her and try and make a little bit more money. So I grew up hunting public pretty much my whole life. And from the time I was like 5 or 6 chasing squirrels and rabbits. And then, you know, I actually started deer hunting by shotgunning on private when I was like 12. But ever since I've started bow hunting at about 15, it's been on public. So my first bow kill was on public. My first buck bow kill was on public. And it's funny because back when I started, I thought, you know, my dream was to have, you know, the vast acreage and the guys that had, you know, could go put in the food plots and could go do all that. But over the years, I've come to just truly love the public land, you know, bow hunting, deer hunting experience. Just purely because you start to get hooked on the challenge. You get hooked on that feeling of, you know, not only did I beat the deer, but I beat, you know, 100,000 other guys that could have got in here and shot this deer, but didn't. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So to me, it's almost like I wear public land like a badge of honor. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to when I was a kid, I kind of looked at it like I was, you know, hunting the second best, you know, option. Now I look at it as, man, I wouldn't do anything else but hunt public. You know, if you gave me the option to go hunt 40 acres of private or, you know, a decent tract of public, I'm on the public all day long. So,
yeah, I felt like the same way. I started on public, and I always felt like, you know, the guys that had the private, they were killing more deer. I was also new to hunting, but it just seems like the past few years that they've made a transition where the public's cool and the private's, you know, not as cool. But back in the day, I'm sure you remember where if you were hunting private or public, people were like, why are you doing that? You know what I mean? They just thought it was just dumb to go out there and try. And I'm like, I'm doing it because I literally don't have another option to hunt. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to find a place to go. And
yeah, it's crazy, man, because like now all of a sudden I feel like we're doing the cool thing, and it used to be like we were, we were kind of like the odd man out.
yeah,
And
exactly. That's why I told homie, like when I first started, it was everybody's like, "You hunt public? That's ridiculous." You know what I mean? And around here, the quality of deer, I mean, it is kind of ridiculous. But now it's a cool thing.
The other weird thing with the way that the industry has kind of shifted is like when I started, and I was hunting with climbers back when I was, long ago, back before, hang and bang was, cool and all that shit. But now it kind of feels a little bit like somebody lifted up your girl's skirt or something, because now everybody's talking about bedding and this and that. And, I knew from an early age when I used to go out and hang, and there was 5 guys on a field edge, that's not where you wanted to be if you wanted to kill deer. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is very true. Podcasts, videos, everything getting out. People are getting more knowledgeable, and it's making it hard for the guy that's been doing the same stuff, to kill them when there's other guys getting in there on top of you.
Right. And so my theory, like, so now like betting has become more of a topic, and I learn and grow from all of the content that's coming out. I wouldn't be the hunter I am if the industry hadn't shifted that way. However, I was like, my theory was always go deep, find the thick stuff, and hang on the downwind side of it. And that's kind of still what I go off of. Now I'm a little, now I delve into the bedding just a little bit more, because, it's become a pretty hot topic of, trying to figure out exactly where they're bedding and what they're doing. But for the most part, I haven't changed what I do as far as just try and outwork the next guy, try and find the spot that's overlooked that, the next guy isn't taking advantage of, and just try and sit there at peak times. And, it seemed to work out for me so far. But yeah, it's just weird now with, you got guys like Dan Infalt, you got the hunting public, and now you've got 50 other, public land channels and things popping up all the time. Seems like everything's public now. So it's driving more people to the public, and it's also showing them a lot. It's taking the learning curve away from hunting public a little bit more. So you're seeing a lot more success, which is a good thing. But again, it's making it a little bit tougher, which is why we like public. But it just is what it is, I guess, in that aspect.
Yeah, I agree with you. It seems like when the industry started, it was the juries, and, Lee and Tiffany and guys like that were like, that's what it was. It was the big farms, private ground, and now they've kind of faded out. And I can see why, the guys like Dan Infalt and stuff are doing so good. They have incredible knowledge, and they're way more relatable to like a guy like you that wants to do it on public. Not knocking juries at all. Their film is some of the best film I've ever seen, but I would rather watch, some guy like me get it done than watch them get it done. That's just how I am.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ruffles some feathers when I'll tell somebody like I find way more satisfaction in shooting 120-inch deer on public than if I was to shoot 160, 170-inch deer on private. And that doesn't mean that I want to take away from what they've done on private, because it's still a hell of an accomplishment to outsmart an old buck, However, to me, when a deer gets to be even 2, but especially just 3 years old on public, they've just had so many more encounters with people, and they've learned people so much better, that to me it's much more of a challenge to kill a 3-year-old on public than it is to kill a 5 or 6-year-old on low pressured large tracts of private ground. Now, not all pieces of private are made equal. We all know that. I mean, I've got pieces of private that just suck, that I just choose not to hunt anymore, because there's just too much pressure from, the landowner letting people in, or the neighbors are pressuring them too hard, or, there's a host of different reasons. But if you got, 200-300 acres plus, and you can put in really nice food plots and stuff, that's awesome. And, I'm not saying I would ever turn down a chance to hunt those. I just prefer the challenge, and I feel a whole lot more accomplished shooting, a 3-year-old on public. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, one thing that, with my first year hunting public, one thing I really noticed is like the deer behavior with putting up or tolerating a hunter. We just put out that blog, and, I feel like them deer know that hunters are going to be in the tree, and, any slight movement, they're gone. But just like on our private piece, which it hasn't been hunted the previous 5 years since we were on there last year, and the deer will just look up at you, but they'll tolerate you up there moving, whether you're standing up, grabbing your bow, getting the camera around, whatever you're doing. They just kind of, tolerate you, and then they just kind of go about their way. But man, you move on public the slightest bit, gone.
You move your ground scent. I think that there's a lot less, they don't put up with near as much ground scent. When you're hanging cameras, they put up with a whole lot less, intrusion into bedding, ground scent into bedding. That's why I utilize rain. I don't check my cameras unless I'm hunting, and I try to hang my cameras close to where I'm going to be hunting. You just don't do it. There's things you learn over the years that, do you want to just see bucks, or do you want to kill bucks? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, like if I go in and if I hang a camera in a bedding area, it's months before season starts, and I use it basically as a way to obviously monitor. I want to see bucks year to year. I mean, it's fun to see the bucks, and to know that they're in there and stuff like that. But I really want to see time of year, time of day, and is anybody in there? How often is anybody else, if ever, in there? You know what I mean? So those are the things I'm really monitoring with my cameras. I got out of the mindset a long time ago of going in to check a camera, finding out if something's on it, and then going in there and hunting it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, we do the same thing. If we ran cameras on public, and we didn't check that one for like 2.5 months.
Yeah.
In the bottom, literally the last day we were going to hunt it, we went and pulled it, and it was an epic pull.
We pulled it the last Sunday before season started, and then we pulled it like the 14th of November.
Yeah. So, and basically what we were trying to figure out is we knew the bucks were on this side. When did they transition to the other side? And now we know. And I was just, homie just bought another mobile Exodus render, and we were talking about like where are we even going to put it, because we don't like. We're gonna hit the public hard next year because we got it figured out. We found some absolutely giant bucks, but we don't think we need that many cams out there because we know they're there.
Yeah.
We know what they're doing in the rut, and that's when we're gonna strike. I feel like if you're trying to kill them early on public, you need to run the cams. But during the rut, just like you said, go to those consistently good spots. As long as you've ran that cam and on one piece of public we had not literally a single picture of a person, didn't see a person, nothing.
Yeah, and that gives you a lot of confidence in your spot to sit there all day. That's one of my biggest things with cameras is I will find a bedding area, I will surround it with cameras from entrance routes and for deer and for people. And when I check it and I don't see anybody has been through there, the entire season, I'm amped up to sit there all day, as long as it takes, because I just know there hasn't been anybody in there bumping them.
Yeah, it's definitely like you said, it helps keep you in the stand. One thing I want to go back on is you had said, the deer don't put up with that much ground scent. And I will say one thing that Cody and I had flawed on public this year is we didn't have like a direct path to the stand each time. It's just kind of overgrown pasture with, big shrub bushes everywhere. So we'd come up, we'd get over to the other side, and then we'd literally be zigzagging and be like,
it's like
okay,
a maze.
yeah.
We got to check the hunt stand every time to get to our stand because it's just like it's so thick and it's like tall grass to your chest and
it's literally a different way to the stand every time. So we had what I would say 150 inch, somewhere in that neighborhood, of a buck come, and the way he was coming from is there was no way he wasn't going to cross where we walked, and there's no other way to get in there. So, I mean, it was inevitable, but that was the second day somebody had been back there. So maybe he could have come 15 yards closer or something.
Yeah.
If we were on the same trail closer to the tree, is what I'm saying. So if you're just constantly hitting that same path, instead of, your scent cone being 20 yards, it's now 50 yards because you've taken 3 different trails
Because you
in there.
zigzagged and trying to figure it out. Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, and I got to say this, man. Really, when you think back, at least on most of my public land encounters, not all of them, but a high percentage of them, the big bucks knew something was up before they got shot or got shot at. And a lot of that time was ground scent. It's not necessarily them catching your scent. A lot of that time it's, and not, maybe they didn't even cross it. Maybe they just smelled, maybe they were just near where you had walked. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But you can just instantly tell something changes in their behavior, at least in my opinion. And they start getting just a little bit boogery. So that's one of the biggest differences, I think, besides just daytime deer movement or buck movement, is just how much quicker they get boogery on human scent and ground scent. And that being said, I long ago have stopped practicing any type of scent control. I used to be a scent control freak, and I think I focused so much on getting rid of human scent that it almost became a hindrance to my hunting, because I was more worried about human scent than I was any other aspect of the hunting. So I've actually totally went, 180 on that, and just basically don't even care about scent other than my entrance route and my scent on stand as far as the wind. That's my 2 biggest things. Other than that, I don't practice a single bit of scent control. And I joke all the time about, how I laugh about how I used to spray myself down with water from these magic sprays back in the day when I was about to go into freezing cold temps for 12, all day sits. And here I am spraying myself down with water. So it's just kind of funny how ever since I made that mental shift, that kind of paradigm shift in my head of focusing more on the hunting than the scent control, I feel like my hunting went through the roof as far as big buck sightings and shots on stand. So,
do you ever still hunt a questionable win, or are you always hunting wins that are guaranteed to not get busted?
So I will do everything I can to make sure that I'm hunting a good wind. I've gotten away from hunting bottoms in the evening, just because you just cannot count on that wind not swirling down there.
Yeah, it's impossible. Yeah,
I really just don't do it. Like maybe if there was some crazy situation, but I just have had so many times where it's magic hour, it's that last hour, half hour, and all of a sudden you're getting snorted at, you're getting blown at, and to me, it's just not worth it. It's too high risk. And since I'm always hunting bedding areas, I've got lots of bedding areas that I just jump around to. To me, it's just not worth it. But so I tend to try to hunt a lot of ridges where the wind is blowing over and down into a bottom that I don't plan on the deer movement happening on, if that makes sense. But I'm definitely not hunting trails and stuff I'm not going down into a bottom in the evening and hunting trails that are running through there. Unless the only instance I can think of where I would is if I'm on more of like a big open field or right on the mouth of a valley where it's feeding out into an open like grass field or something like that. That might be the only instance where I would hunt, low like that. But typically I'm hunting like sides of hills, sides of bedding, something like that. Something where I feel like the wind's still going to carry a little bit, or I've got some obstacle where the wind's, going to carry over. So
I think that's what we do sometimes. Like we do the scent control, and I feel like we press our wind a little bit. So I feel like if we didn't do any scent control at all in our brains, we would naturally revert back to like cannot do that. You know what I mean? But I feel like and we still get the only thing that I think really is eliminated is we don't get blown at. We have deer like we don't have anything just blow out of there. You know, you can see that they're alerted, but it's not like when I used to hunt with no scent control and it's automatically like gone. You know what I mean? But I could see if you went to no scent control at all, I would think way more about like, okay, I have no chance at all to even beat these deer 1%. So I got to be on the money with the wind. So
yeah, and that's I focus far more on wind, and actually even more than wind. I mean, wind matters, but wind on stand is pretty easy to figure out. You know what I'm saying? But your entrance is even more important. And like when you're hanging and hunting, you know, you're carrying your stand in there, like taking your time as you're going and really peeping out the trees in front of you and trying to figure it out before you go too far and then have to backtrack, I think is crucial too, because like a lot of the times you get to a tree and then you're like, shit, I got to go back that way. Well, now you boogered up 20, 40 yards up the way that you plan on deer walking. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think that taking your time and stand selection too relates to scent control in a weird way, because you don't want to just push in and then all of a sudden if you're backing up, I think you're doing yourself a big, injustice there.
Yeah, I could see that. Once you get to that point, like we were this year, we had a tree picked out. We were going to go to it and ended up being in a pond. Like there was literally no water. It was dry. And we went back there a month later and it's in 3 foot of water. And we did rush, you know what I mean? And I could see like if you're rushing to get, because when you get to that point, you're like, I got to get in a tree. So I could see the scent control and your ground scent and direction of wind completely going out of your mind, and all you're thinking about is I got to get up in a tree to kill something. So
I will say that like we were talking about, the Drurys and Lee and Tiffany, and we grew up, I'm sure you did too. I grew up watching them, and I did learn some valuable stuff from them. And one thing that always rings in my head when I get close, within the red zone of where I'm going to set up, is I remember Lee always saying that he believed that most people busted or ruined their hunt and busted deer out of there the last 80 to 100 yards to their stand. And that always repeats in my head. And when I get close to that tree, I have to mentally stop, slow down, and I start almost still hunting to my tree as opposed to walking. I don't, it doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the dark, in the morning, or if it's, if I'm going out for an afternoon sit. When I get close, I start to slow down and really try to think things through every step. I don't, obviously when you're walking in there, a lot of the time you can just walk heavy, but when you get close to your stand, that last 80 yards, that's what matters right there. So at least in my mind, that's kind of my mental thought on it.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I mean, definitely something, keep in the front of your brain when you
I was
when
thinking
you are
about
closing
when
in
we
there.
went and pulled that trail camera, the deeper one on the west side of that one public where there's no people.
Yeah.
We went in there like ninjas, because we were trying to decide whether we're hunting there or hunting back. And once we pulled that trail camera and we decided that we were hunting back, we automatically were like, okay, we got to go. And we went back and we busted those does. But we were able to walk all the way in there and they didn't bust.
Yep.
But since we were in a hurry to get out of there, they automatically bust. So if we would have did exactly like, okay, I'm going to go slow. I'm still 80, 100 yards from where I'm hunting. If we would have just snuck out of those does probably never would have came. Buck could have come bumped them. It could have been a completely different story. But we bumped those deer by automatically thinking, okay, I need to make it 80 yards back this way to hunt. So that's a good tip, man. I need to do that more often. Just slow down and
I always revert back to too is, so I cut my teeth on squirrel hunting like I'm sure a lot of you guys did, but if you're not walking slow enough to see squirrels, going up and down trees right by you, not knowing you're there, then you're going too fast for a deer. So that's kind of my thinking, is if I'm not seeing, and obviously you're not always going to see squirrels everywhere you're hunting, but what I'm saying is in your mind, if you're not walking slow enough to sneak up on a squirrel, you're definitely not walking slow enough to sneak up on a bedded deer.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So let's get into kind of the reason why we wanted to have you on is, I mean, you had one hell of a year. Probably, I mean, I'd take that every year.
Yeah.
Let's kind of, was your first encounter with a buck in range, was that in November or was it earlier in the year?
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to go into this too. So if you'd have talked to me at the end of October as opposed to the end of November, you'd have been talking to two totally different hunters, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of October, I felt pretty defeated. I hadn't seen a single deer on stand bigger than a spike or a forky. I can't remember, but it was just the October from hell for me. I mean, I still love hunting. It doesn't matter if I see big bucks or not. But as far as, as far as seeing big buck movement, it was absolutely zero. It was a big goose egg. So
That's about like ours. We were like, where are these? Do they even exist out here?
right, and I mean, I was catching them. Like when I would go to a stand and I would check a camera, I would have deer in there, and it was just like either I was always making the wrong decision, or, and also the other thing that was crazy is it felt like every cold front would hit just after or just before my days off. So there was like 4 or 5 giant cold fronts in October,
Mm-hmm.
and I really didn't get to hunt any of them effectively. So I'm sitting there just banging my head against the wall at work going, come on, man, like, give me a break here.
It's probably fire out there.
Yeah.
That's why I always think when it's cold and I'm at work, I'm like, dude, it's probably just banging out there.
Right. Yeah, you know how it is. The grass is always greener on the other side. But so I think a lot of what contributed also, though, was the standing corn. I mean, obviously that was kind of plaguing everybody, whether you're on private, on public. I mean, there was corn standing, I mean, I think into late November, so in some places. So
Yeah, they were picking around our private piece, the actually first shotgun season and that whole weekend. So, and then they finished up the week of Thanksgiving. So we had kind of went in with the wet spring we had. We had kind of went in mentally prepared for that to be the scenario. And of course, that's what it was.
yeah, and I think another big piece of it with that is, and I tell myself this every year, and I'm really bad about it, but so most people that I've known that have had success, at least on the public pieces that I hunt, early season, are actually hunting on field edges because the deer aren't pressured yet. They're still on feeding patterns and stuff like that. And even myself, back in the day when I would hunt field edges a lot more than I do now, I used to have really good encounters, and I've shot some really good bucks on field edges. But it seems like as I go on in my hunting and I'm pushing farther and this and that, it's harder for me to flip my mindset to go and sit on those field edges when realistically they're not bedding that far from those field edges early season, and they're making it there during daylight. And I think that is something I tell myself every year I'm going to try and work on as a hunter. And this year with the standing corn, I think it amplified it. Even worse, I think I was pushing still back into those bedding areas farther than I should have too early, thinking like, I got a good cold front, I got to get back into into the good bedding. And even if I missed them, if I was on the tail end of it or something, I was trying to get in there and make it happen. And I think that was a huge part of it, was a lot of the guys I knew that were seeing deer, were around that standing corn or wherever it had been picked or whatever.
So your October was garbage. And then did you take a vacation in November?
I did. So every year I find, like, if I had to pick just 3 days to hunt every year, it would be about the 9th through the 11th. And so I got, I think 7 days or something like that. So usually, since I know that the first couple does start to come into estrus, or at least start giving off the pheromones, around the 5th or the 6th, I like to start it then. And then I figure usually the 9th or the 11th is almost a guarantee there's going to be big deer up and on their feet. So I took, I think the 5th through like the 13th off.
That's pretty good stunt. That's when was our best day this year? Was it the 10th?
Well, the 3rd and the 4th was as far as what Cam showed.
No, I meant the day we were out there on public. The day you hunted. Was that the 10th?
Yeah, the 10th.
Yeah. The 10th was our best day for rut act. What, we see 5 shooters that day?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And all with does.
All with does, yep. So
I shot my big buck on the 10th with my bow, so.
Did you? Yeah. I've always told homie, what I always say, the 7th through the 9th is what I always like to say. Those are my day. And I think we're going to do the 3rd through the...
Yeah, we're going to do that first full... No, well, we do that first full week. I think it'd be into the late October, so maybe that following
Well, it depends
week.
on what goose season is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to go off of that. But yeah, we're gonna plan on hunting the pre-rut a little more than the actual, when the does really start coming in. We feel like we missed a lot of opportunities by what the cameras showed us. So we were kind of thinking the same thing, hold off, save that vacation, and then it roll us right into shotgun season. We'll have that off, and
the only thing where I wish that I had more, I wish I had 2 weeks instead of one, because I'd split it up, because like the 180 was on the 19th, and like another buddy of mine who's killed 3 or 4 deer over 150, I think he posted something where he said all of my deer over 150 have been killed from like the 14th through the 21st or something crazy like that. So even though I know you can kill them before that, which obviously I did and stuff like that, but sometimes I think that waning rut is a lot better chance to kill like a true, like giant, just because those big bucks, well, as has been, chronicled in other people's articles and talking and stuff like that, those big bucks, they know their does, they know their areas. And even though the bucks get quote unquote stupid during the rut, them big boys didn't get to 5 and 6 by just, being that stupid. So I think that as the does start to wane off that are in heat, and then they have to go into a little bit more unfamiliar territory, that's when you capitalize, when those big boys are out there looking for them last does. So I wish I had the amount of time to take off where I could capitalize on that movement. Cause I personally think I'd kill a lot more, book bucks, or at least have chances at them, if I was able to take more time off later in the rut, as opposed to just the time I take off early. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I could see that. We've seen that a lot. Giants killed on the 17th. I've had the weekend of Thanksgiving. I've seen giants. There's that late November. It's nothing to sleep on for sure. I mean, they're out there. I feel like you're not going to see as much action. Sometimes I say, like, you're not going to see a lot of deer, but if you do see a deer, it's going to be the right deer, and I feel like that's that time frame. You're not going to see as many, you're not going to see 5 shooters in a day, I don't feel like, but if you're sitting there, it's going to be a big deer if it's up and moving, is what I feel.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes it's almost hard to miss that time when like you're going to have every buck on their feet chasing that doe. But I personally think that if I could ever switch my mindset over to hunting that waning rut over the early rut, I think I'd kill bigger deer. Just my personal opinion, but it's so hard to miss out on the days where you got you got a 90% chance of seeing a 150-inch deer walking around.
Yeah, I know. The first year you did that and it didn't go through, you'd be like, damn it, I'm so dumb. You know what I mean? That's why we were at work that full week. I was like, man, we should be out there. It's on fire. It's on fire. And
everybody was saying it was fire.
Yeah, everybody was saying it's incredible. And then here we go. We were at work like, this is dumb. And then we had all right, but man, we had some slow hunts too. It was like, I really, what I learned this year was, it seems like out there you do get a little bit of cruising action, but if you have a hot doe in your area, You literally, we have like, we seen like every buck we have on cam. You know what I mean? It was insane.
I agree.
But
I agree.
if you don't, you might catch a cruiser, and that's about it midday. But we just, if you have a hot doe, it's just like on private. It's no different than public. You know, if you have a hot doe in your area, it's going to be a great day. And
let me tell you about November set. Well, actually, you want me to just tell you about the whole?
Yeah, go ahead and break down your whole rut season here.
All right, so the first day that I had off was actually an afternoon. Was when I went out, and I had a lot of animal action, but I didn't have the buck action that I was after. It was still kind of warm or whatever. But then that next morning, I went into this little area that was I actually hung 40 yards off of a main horse trail, and when I was dragging I shot this 120 a couple years back in October, and when we were down at the bottom of when we were on this horse trail, and me and a buddy went to go look at the trail that we was going to walk, and my cousin stayed back with the buck, and he said a giant and a doe came right down to the horse trail, and we're just standing there, and then decided to go back up after we had walked by making a bunch of noise. So it got me thinking, like, you know, because this is such a little narrow corridor, because there's a creek on one side and there's a horse trail on the other, I got to thinking, like, man, then, you know, it can't be that pressured. There's not any timber over here in this little grass field, really. And I thought, what they do is they wait till people go by on horses or hunters go by, and they listen, and then they utilize it. You know what I mean? So my thinking too was, with it being November 6th, and a good chance that the first does were coming, were you know, going to give off their pheromones but not quite be ready, was with that tall grass and it being not as quite a pressured, that it'd be a good spot for a doe to go and hide if a buck was chasing it, right? If some bucks were after it but it wasn't quite ready, I figured, well, this would be a good spot for it to come get away from them. So that was my thinking. And plus I had hunted kind of in the area before and knew that there was good deer that run around in there. So I go in there and totally didn't have a tree picked out or anything, just kind of had an area that I knew I wanted to hunt, and go in there, hang up in this cottonwood real low to the ground. I mean, I was probably, because it was actually in a ditch. The tree grew up out of a ditch. So like what I was actually off of the ground was probably, I would say, like 10 feet or something like that. So really wasn't that high, but there was cover kind of behind me and stuff with the tree. So I felt like, well, at least my silhouettes broke up pretty good. So anyway, I'm sitting there and just kind of had done my interview and was just sitting there. Maybe I was looking at my phone or something. All of a sudden, I hear grunting up in front of me on this ridge. And I look up, and sure enough, there's this buck grunting, and he was big, and I knew he was, but I thought he was just going to keep heading along that ridge. And I hadn't seen the doe yet. And I didn't know if I should grunt, but I was like, well, if he's grunting at something, you know, I'm probably not going to get him off of it. And all of a sudden I look down, and the doe shoots by me at 20 yards, right in my shooting lane in the grass. And I hear him grunting, and I thought, well, when she shot by, I knew for a fact he was coming, you know? So I come to full draw. I hear him grunting his head off. I mean, he's just grunting nonstop. And I'm wondering where the heck he's at. I'm kind of holding for a second. And then all of a sudden he shows up right there in my shooting lane, and I let one fly, and my arrow went haywire. And I don't know. And I'm sitting there like, what the hell happened, you know? And so he runs off about 50 yards. I put my 40-yard pin high. I grabbed a second arrow. He was probably actually like 55 yards. I put my 40-yard pin high just above his back, thinking he was like 50. And when I let it fly, I actually thought it hit him, but it must have went just low. So I must have just barely misjudged that distance, I feel like. But anyway, he ran off, and, you know, it's documented on that video. But so there I am. I haven't seen anything worth even talking about all of October, and now all of a sudden I've got like I said, I don't know if he's 150, 160, something like that, but he was just, you know, a jaw dropper. And here I messed up on him. Well, I went to look at the footage, and my whisker biscuit had actually, when the wind was blowing my bow, had smacked the arrow down into the whisker biscuit bristles. and I didn't realize it on that first shot. So I let it fly, and that explained why that one went all crazy on me. So, so then I sat there a few more hours. I was, I was pretty low, obviously. And I go back to the truck for a little bit, just to eat some lunch, and kind of at that point I was going to switch over because that really wasn't an all day kind of stand. It was more of like a morning stand. So I was thinking I was going to go somewhere that was more of like still kind of bedding, but like doe bedding that's a little bit closer to food, because I figured that bucks would be cruising that downwind side of those a little bit closer to the food. I still don't ever sit right on the food, just because I like I said, it just you might see deer, but your chances of somebody walking in on you I feel like go up by like 90% sitting on a field edge, And so anyway, the next and actually what's crazy is so that afternoon I go back to the truck, and actually I ran into a buddy who I hadn't seen in years, who I had actually got into bow hunting out there. I had showed him the ropes around there, and come to find out, when we was heading back, he was actually heading back to a spot that I had put him on like 7 years prior, and he'd been seeing deer in there. And actually, that's where I was heading to that night. But I said, "Hey, man, if that's where you're heading," and he had put a stand up in there and stuff, and I was like, "Hey, I'm all for it, because, I like seeing my buddies succeed more than myself. So I'd rather, him get in there and shoot something nice. I'd be pretty happy for him." So, but it was just crazy because after all those years, and there he was down in that spot. So, but I was like, well, shit, if you're going to go there, I'm going to go to the other side. And so actually it pushed me to go to a spot that I'd been planning on hunting later, because I had trail cam photos of deer later in the year, usually like post rut. But I thought, you know what? It kind of fits the bill, fits the wind. I'm going to go in there. Well, so the crazy part is I walk right past the tree I want to hunt, and I decided I didn't like it. Go walking all the way, yada, yada, make this big circle, but the leaves were so crunchy. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and hang in that one spot. So I make this big circle, and I was kind of cussing myself for not getting up in there in the first place. And when I come back, there's a big buck standing directly under the tree where I was going to be in earlier. Okay. And he bounds away. He didn't know what I was, but he knew something was up there. And so he was cruising that bedding area just like I thought he would. And if I'd have got up in there, I'd have had a crack at him. Literally walked at the base of the tree I was going to get in. So I kind of just sit up against a tree the rest of the night, just looking out over this valley, seeing if I can maybe pick up some kind of observation on movement or something like that. And because at that point I was like, I'd missed a big one, and then I had a big one under a tree. I was like, this is comical, And so then I go home, and I figured, all right, I'm going to go to a totally different spot, shake this one off, go to a completely different spot. And so go to this different bedding area, and it's like 3 miles away from where I was hunting at that spot. Okay. This is all the same piece of public, but this one's way, way far away from that one. And because like what I do is I go around and I will just I'll scout bedding areas and then hop around them during the rut. Like I said, I'll find the spot where I want to hunt on the bedding area, like the downwind side. And if it fits the bill, I'll hunt it that day. And so anyway, I go to that spot where the previous year I had shot. So I had, and it kind of all ties together, but because the spot I went to, I actually had shot a big buck in the shoulder the previous year. And it's also the first time I picked up pictures that when I shot that buck was the first time I picked up pictures of the big buck that I ended up shooting during shotgun. But I'll come back to that when I tell that story. But so I go in there, and it was on November 7th. It was literally from walking in there in the dark. I had to push deer away from my stand, and it's like they didn't even want to run out of there. It's like I couldn't get deer off of me that day. All morning, from the time I got in there was bucks chasing does around all around my stand. On the other hill, I probably saw three or four mature bucks. I can't remember exactly. And one of them actually was upwind and snorted at me. And I think he saw me somehow through this crazy like brush and stuff like that. But anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, this is, it's a pretty wild morning. And then about, I can't remember if it was like 7:13 or it was like 8:30, something like that. A really nice 8-pointer shows up right at the bottom of the hill and starts coming up. And this is on that video too. And he gets right to the edge of where I was at full draw for a while there. And when he gets right to the edge of where he's about to walk out, where I'd had open shot, he stops right there in the brush. And I'd been holding for a while, and I was pretty low and he was kind of right there. So I had some daylight through the brush on his vitals. And so anyway, I let it fly and didn't realize that what I thought was behind the shoulder actually was the shoulder. But I didn't know that until I got down to check the arrow. So he ran off, and I actually was up there celebrating, thinking, hell yeah, I redeemed myself from the day before, like hell yeah. But sure enough, I get down, and there's like 3 inches of penetration, snapped the broadhead off. The arrow was right there, no blood. And actually I had sat for a while because I wasn't going to go blood trail him, and I saw more deer and, this and that. But then once I found that out and I was pretty dejected, pretty low, I got out around probably like 3:30, 4 o'clock. And on the walk back, I actually had a big buck chasing a doe by me in the grass at like 60 yards, and I dropped down, and they didn't know I was there, but they never did come up close. Never did come close enough for a shot. And then I get back to the truck, and there's a doe with about 120 some inch deer standing out there right by the truck in the cornfield, right by my truck. So I get down, and he actually makes it to about 60 yards as well, and then goes into the timber. And so anyway, that whole day, that whole November 7th was just like nonstop action. And really those 2 days I'd had a lot of buck action. And so I'm thinking, well, and that was probably the lowest I was when I'd had two days in a row where I'd screwed it up. So then that next morning I thought, well, I'm going to go back into that hill where they was all chasing. Hopefully something, I didn't figure that doe would still be in there, but I figured something from the day before that had got their butt kicked was going to be cruising back through there, looking for a doe, because obviously with 3, 4, 5 bucks all in there after the same doe, there's a good chance that only one of them got up with her, and then the other ones are going to be out there looking. So anyway, I go set up in there, and it was like the action came to a complete halt, man. Like nothing but does, dinks. Like I had does under me, I had a spike under me, and then I had like 10 coyotes under me. And I actually made a move at one point and kind of moved up into the thicker stuff, hoping that I would catch something cruising. And but that's another thing I kind of want to touch on too is, so a lot of the times guys go out there and it's so much work just getting out there and getting your tree set up that they don't, if you see something better, you have to make the move. No matter how much work it is, you have to make the move. I can't tell you how many times that I've been sitting there and I've seen something happen and then I didn't make the move and something goes right by in that same spot and you're kicking yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I think that as you grow as a hunter and stuff like that, and you just go through those situations more and more, it really forces you to realize, like, I have to do something now, or I'm going to be I'm going to be sitting here wishing I had, right? Anyway, so that whole day went by, and like I had in the video, as I'm driving home, every single parking lot had just nothing but, brand new Fords and Chevys in it. Right. And, every state and a lot of Illinois boys too. And, but right as I'm about to get out of the park, I look over and I see, a a really nice buck, bedded down with a doe, because I'd already figured that lockdown had hit from everything halting the way it had. But then it just kind of confirmed, like, yeah, all right, the big boys got them. They're sitting down. So now I'm going to go right into the heart of the bedding. And I was sitting all day anyway, but now when I know they're on lockdown, that's when my 10 to 2, hunting really, at least in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to miss the middle of the day in bedding, right? So I go into a spot where actually it's where I had shot that 120 a couple years ago, but I shot him in October. So it wasn't on like a cruising setup or anything like that. He was actually bedded in there, and I had caught him leaving his bed, and he was kind of sparring with another buck, and I grunted him up to me and I shot him. So, but in previous years I had seen a lot of chasing and seeking in there too. So just in my mind, if it hadn't been touched, it was going to be a good spot. And so anyway, I sneak in there. It was dead calm. You could hear a mouse fart for 200 yards, and I get set up in there, and I had a doe snort at, or something. I did a calling sequence early with what I'll do for calling too, when it comes to what do you call it? When I'm calling during the rut, I used to do a lot more rattling than what I do now. And now I've kind of just went to, at least on public for sure, I'll do some tending grunts and maybe some bleats, because while I've had rattling work out a lot, I've also had it spook a lot more too. So at least for me, especially when I'm on an all-day sit and I'm trying to stay in that mentality of, something could happen anytime, I've kind of gotten away from banging the horns together. So, take from that what you will. I know that rattling works. I've seen it work even on public. I just, in years past, have kind of gotten away from it just because I think positive mindset is key on all-day sits. It's hard enough sitting there on, a little platform for 10 and 12 hours without thinking that you spooked all the deer out of there 4 hours ago,
Yeah, exactly.
And so, anyway, I threw a calling sequence out, and something showed up just behind me and blew out of there. And so I was like, well, we're starting the day, just like the rest of the week's been going. And it was around 8 or 8:30. A couple does way down at the bottom of the hill was moving. And then a little bit later, around 11, a doe moved right underneath me, the way I thought that they were going to be coming, from behind me, right underneath me. And I was like, well, okay, that's cool. And then about a half hour later, I looked way up on the hill, up on top of the hill, and there was I knew it was a buck, and it looked like he was cruising, but I just couldn't tell how big. So I'm sitting there, and it's like 50 degrees, and, I got my coat just hanging there on the thing. I'm like, well, just thinking about the week and stuff like that. And all of a sudden I look up, and the deer that I ended up shooting was coming in right through the middle of the hill, just like I was hoping he would, checking for does. So he come through, and I was worried because I couldn't turn, and he was on the high side of the hill. So, we was somewhat, he could see me if I would have moved, and he gets to where I was worried he was going to hit my ground scent. It was 12:30. So it had been, like 7 hours, I think, since I'd walked through there. But I knew that if he hit it, there was a good chance he was going to booger out of there. So I was ready. I was ready to draw as soon as he did anything, as soon as I saw him do anything out of the ordinary, I was going to draw and let one fly. And that's what happened is he hit it and stopped on a dime and started looking around. And then all of a sudden he went to run the other way and stopped. And I was already at full draw, and the rest is history. He ran to the bottom of the hill and crashed, and I heard him. And of course I'm losing my mind up there in the tree. And because, all the emotions that run through your mind after you miss a bunch, and you've went through the highs and lows and the roller coaster, and man, you just kind of, you lose it, And it was actually funny. I called my wife and kid, and they were at the zoo with her friend, and of course I sounded crazy. I had adrenaline going through the roof, and I was like, honey, I was like, put my daughter on the phone, and I was like, hey, I love you, honey, and I love you guys. And they're like, Daddy, I see a rhinoceros. and then my wife's like, did you get in a car wreck or something? Because I sounded all crazy, And I was like, never mind. I was like, I love you guys. I said, I got to call somebody that understands. So anyway, I lit the phone lines up, but then at one point I had to get down because I just couldn't sit up there anymore. And so I get down and I go down there, and there he was laying in this spot where I'd actually ran cams for the last couple years. And so most of the bucks that I'd caught going through there, I caught in that spot. And I'd actually usually hunt that opening right where he died. So the fact that I had stood in that spot and sat there for a long time, and then that deer died right in that spot was kind of nuts, man. Just how it all kind of culminated and ended right there. And so I'm on, if 10 is happy, I'm on 20. You know what I mean? At that point, I was super stoked. Didn't think my season could get any better. So I didn't even really get to hunt after that, but up until about the 19th. But the crazy part is obviously not only was that deer, he died in the middle of nowhere at the bottom of a hill, so had to call in all the troops and to get him out of there and stuff like that. But when I finally got to take him to the taxidermist, we had this crazy blizzard come through that Monday, and it took me like 4 hours to get to Jacksonville and back from here, which is only like a half-hour trip. There, it's a half hour there, half hour back. But it just felt like that whole week fought me every step of the way. Even getting him to the taxidermist was kind of like life or death. So anyway, I didn't really get to make it out again until the 19th, and I figured, well, since I hadn't been in that spot for a while, where I shot that one in the shoulder, the one the year before and the one during my rut vacation week, I thought, well, I'll go in there and I'm gonna move in on this spot where that 10-pointer that I ended up shooting during shotgun had been showing up on camera. So the story of the buck that I've come to call King of the Hill, I don't really tend to name deer. We'll jokingly do it on my cousin's little 40-acre piece. Like we'll call him like Carl or Dave or something just as a joke. But I'm not really big into naming deer, but like after kind of the story comes together, and especially like making videos and stuff like that, it helps to have like a title or a name. So like I called the title of that video was King of the Hill. But up until that point, I didn't name the deer. I just kind of knew him as this really nice 8-pointer from the year before with really white tines. And the next year, this year, he had blown up into a really nice 10, and super even, super just, nothing that was like jaw dropping, just a really nice, pretty symmetrical 10. And so the previous year, I actually had, when I had shot that deer in the shoulder, what led up to that was I actually had, so it's a pretty crazy story. So the bedding area that I shot my 10-pointer in with the bow that I just got done telling you guys about, I was hunting that last year during my rutcation in the beginning, and it was warm and I wasn't seeing any movement. My trail cameras weren't picking up anything when I went in there and was hunting them. So midway through the week of my hunting, my rut vacation last year, I decided that I was going to utilize, there was the third day in between, like my 5 days off was going to be super windy, and the cold front was coming in and it was going to be super cold the next couple days. So I thought, well, I need to take this time to go do some scouting and to get on a deer, or to get on some deer. I said I need to go find these does. I said because right now I'm not even on does. So I go over there, and all I did was took my bow with me and started walking around, just kind of doing I was kind of still hunting, looking for does, trying to creep up on bedding and see. I didn't even care if I bumped them out of there. I just wanted to find does. I wanted to find a large concentration of does, and then I felt like I was going to be in the money when that cold front hit. So I also was obviously looking for hunter pressure and stuff like that. So one of the things I come across is this big bodied deer laying there with his head cut off down in this creek, right? And I got pictures of that. I took pictures of him, and of course I was like, oh, well, somebody's obviously hunting in here, because this was obviously at least a 3 or 4 year old plus buck with his head cut off, right? But I'm looking at him, and I guessed him at a week old, at how long he'd been sitting there. The coyotes really hadn't touched much, hardly at all, but he was bloated up, and I just kind of guessed him at about a week he'd been laying there. So, well, actually, here's the weird part of that. So the head was still on. They had cut the horns off, okay? And so I head deeper back into this piece, and then I come across this young, probably 1.5, I would think, maybe 2.5-year-old 8-point, laying there dead, and he was only like a day old, and he had a pretty good shot on him. So I don't know if somebody just shot him and couldn't find him, or shot him and left him. And I'm like, man, Rambo's in here just knocking deer out of the, just plugging them, So, but not right where I found him. I pushed up this valley a little bit where all these valleys came together, and I laid down because there were some does that came out, and then on this other hillside, there were some other does. So I'm like, so there's bucks in here. I said, I've seen nothing but does in here, and they didn't seem pressured. They were just walking around out there. I was like, all right, this is where I'm setting up tomorrow morning. So I move in the next morning in my climber, because there were some climbing trees right where that all came together. And so I get set up, and right at like first light, like 130-inch buck comes walking through about 40 yards away, but through this kind of thick cover that goes through this valley right in the middle of it. And so I thought, well, shit, I got to get down. I got to move over there. If that's where the deer movement's happening, if that's where the bucks are cruising through, that's where I got to be. So I move over, make the move immediately, go over, and I'm halfway, or actually I'm about set up the tree. My bow's still on the ground, and about 20 plus turkeys fly all up around me in the trees. I'm like, what in the hell? And I look, and a family of like 3 or 4 bobcats come walking right past me. I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So then eventually I have to move and grab my stuff, and the turkeys kind of bust out of there. But then like an hour later, a bunch of turkeys do the same thing just a little ways over on the other hill. And a big tom bobcat comes walking through then. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, But anyway, that morning later, a little bit later, I saw a buck up the valley, even going up into some thick stuff where the other buck had came out of. And I had actually scouted that area and put a camera up in that bedding that summer, but I had never checked it. So I thought, all right, well, next morning, that's where I'm going to be. And actually, I put my buddy where I was, where the bobcats and where the buck was. I put him right there on that buck cruising movement. And then I went up into that bedding, and my buddy actually got a shot at a buck. And then I was sitting there, and I heard it snort. He missed the buck, and I had some does come by, and then sure enough, a buck came right behind him. I go to take a shot, and I hit a limb, and then the buck ran up off the, obviously ran off. Well, then a little bit later at like 10:27, a cruising buck came just underneath me, and that's the one that I ended up shooting in the shoulder. So I knew and then that was when I checked the camera, and was the first time that I saw the 10-pointer. Okay. So I knew he was on there. I knew he was in there. And then the next day I was up in there, and a buck that I thought was him that I also had on camera when I got him, which is chronicled in that video, a smaller 8 comes in at 20 yards and he makes a scrape. And I was kind of back and forth on shooting him, but he was like 1 or 2 steps away from being in my opening, and he never did make it in there. But I wasn't quite sure if I was going to shoot him because I was pretty far back in there. So anyway, I knew it was a good spot, and I picked up that deer on camera, and then I hunted it again in shotgun and never did see him. But so fast forward to this year during spring turkey, and I go in there, and I was like, I was wanting to turkey hunt in there, obviously from the all the turkeys I'd seen in there with the bobcats and stuff. So I was like, well, this would be a good spot to go in and try and pop a tom, And I go up into that bedding area after the morning fly down. Once I knew that it was, it was going to be calm for a little bit, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go up in there, maybe look for some mushrooms, look for a shed. I get right up in there where the camera had gotten all the pictures of him in October and November. And his shed is laying right there in front of where the camera got all his pictures. And it was kind of weird. I was like, man, this is weird. Because it's not like, it's not it's not like a bedding spot. It's just kind of a pass-through area. So it was just kind of cool that he dropped it in that exact spot where I had my cam.
Yeah, that is pretty sweet.
Yeah. And what's weird is as I grabbed that antler, I remember sitting there thinking, I'm going to kill this deer. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, I will shoot this deer. And a half hour later, I shoot my biggest turkey in like 15 years. And my first public land gobbler. I'd shot some jakes, and I'd been trying to get a public land gobbler for like 5 or 6 years. It had become almost comical because I killed a lot of toms on private, but every time I would pull public, like they would always just skirt me, and this and that would happen. And anyway, so I'm sitting there with that antler and that turkey, and in my mind, there's no way I'm not killing this deer. So fast forward, obviously, because I found the shed and because I had the pics, of course I'm going to run cams in there again, So I hang my cam mid-summer, mid to late summer. Usually I like to be in there like at least a month to 2 months before season if I'm going to go into a bedding area and hang a cam. And I hang it up high and I angle it down. Like, that's the new fad nowadays. So that's nothing new. It's just it's really good practice, I think, for bedding areas, simply because them big bucks, man, if you ever catch them on camera, they're always looking right at your camera when it's at eye level, And for whatever reason, I just feel like they know they're there, and they kind of skirt that area. So so fast forward to this year, and I go in there during my rut vacation and check my cams. And actually I take that back. I had been in there one time during October during a cold front when I knew there was going to be rain later that day, and I checked it and I found out that he was in there. And that was a big part of the reason why I went in there during my rut vacation again. Obviously I'd had shots the previous year, so I was going to hunt that bedding area anyway, but I really wanted to run into that deer. So didn't see him during the rut vacation, but fast forward to November the 19th, I go in there after him, and I have that big 180 come in there. And I'd also had a nice 8-pointer that morning at 20 yards I could have shot. But where he came by and where a doe came by, I decided I needed to make a move. So at 10 o'clock, I got down, moved up the ridge. Took me about an hour. I was set up by 11, and luckily I did. It had been windy throughout the middle of the day, but I knew that wind was going to die down about 3 o'clock. So I was really holding out for that 3 o'clock wind die down. And about 2:40, it died down. I threw out a grunting, tending grunt and a bleat and kind of sat down. I've been sitting for like 10 hours at that point. And I look up and I see a giant at 30 yards, like, one of those things you can't even describe, like how big they are. And so he comes in, and it had went from being crazy windy to absolutely silent. Could hear a pin drop. And I grabbed my bow when he went behind a tree and turned, and he stopped on a dime. So I don't know if he heard me. I don't know if he hit downwind of me, or I don't know if he caught some kind of movement. But he didn't look right up at me. He just stopped. And so I came to full draw, waiting for him to step out from behind this tree. And all he did was step his neck out towards me. So I'm sitting there at full draw for like a minute, maybe a minute and a half. But he just decided either he didn't see what was in there making the noise, or he just didn't like something. And he wasn't acting real spooky. He just turned around to walk away the other way. I saw an opening and had been holding full draw for a while. And when I saw that opening, I put it on his vitals, let it fly, hits a branch, and deflects. He just bounds away, doesn't snort, doesn't act real spooky. So I don't know if he thought a branch broke or what, but he definitely wasn't coming back around to find out. So I'm sitting there, and I'm wondering how in the hell I could go from shooting my biggest deer on public after all that bad juju that was going on all week. And I was super, super excited. Now all of a sudden I'm sitting there in a tree, exhausted, and feeling just super, super down on myself. Just missed the biggest deer I've ever even thought of seeing at 20 yards on public. And, I was in there chasing like what I thought was a 150-inch deer, and a 180-inch deer shows up. And I was just sitting there like, had that sick feeling, that sick feeling in my stomach again, like, how in the hell do you mess this up, Rogers? And I was just like banging my head against the wall, like, how do you go from feeling like you did it to screwing it up again, So anyway, I was like, well, shotguns the next day I can get out, which was the 22nd. And I felt like, since I never saw that buck on camera, and never, hadn't heard of anybody seeing anything like that or anything, that was the first time I'd ever seen or heard of that buck. So to me, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, he's just, it's the 19th. He's just randomly running around looking for does. And I really didn't feel like there was a good chance of me seeing him again. But when you see a 180-inch deer at 20 yards, you're not going to not go back in there, right?
Yeah, no, you're going to be there.
So I was like, all right, well, and then in my head, I'm laughing, thinking, now I'm going to shoot my target buck, and he's going to feel like a consolation prize.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, but not that I look at that deer as a consolation prize. I feel blessed how my season ended up. Just saying, like, I was like, watch, it's going to be comical. I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to shoot my deer, and now I'm going to be thinking about that 180. So anyway, I'm heading there. I get up in there, and instead of sitting the tree that I shot at the 180 in, I decided that I was going to move about 10 to 15 yards up the ridge even more, because I could see over into that grass field where I ended up shooting him, and down into the woods. So, just a tip or a lesson for anybody listening: don't ever get married to one tree, because I think that routine is probably the biggest killer of success in the deer woods. Just because I saw a 180-inch deer and had a shot at him does not mean that I have to go sit that exact same tree the next time, right? So if you could take one thing away, do not fall into a routine. That will kill you. And if you're chasing big bucks on public land. So anyway, I go in there, I get set up, and it never happens this way, but right at first light, I look over, giant white rack right there. And at first I thought he was going to walk right towards me through the grass, and I was going to let him come. But then when he started turning and heading like he was heading out the side of it, and I knew I had a short window to make it happen, I put the crosshairs on him, I pulled the trigger, and I really didn't. I gave it my best effort, but I had no idea if I hit that deer or not, because the second after I shot him, he ran out of view, and I'm sitting up in there not knowing what I should do. Obviously, I know I got to go down and look for blood after I shoot at an animal, but it's the perfect morning. It's a north wind. It's it's gray. It's cold. It's opening morning. It's Friday. I'm like, shit, man, I don't want to get down right now in the middle of prime time if I didn't kill this deer, but obviously I had to. So I go still hunting through the woods, and right as where I get where I think he ran out, there's a younger buck standing right there, and he kind of jumps away. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird, So then I get up to where that younger buck was, and some more deer bound away on the hill over. And I'm looking around, and I'm getting reeled down because I thought he ran straight out of the side of the field. And I'm like, shit, man, I didn't hit that deer. I don't see any blood. And then all of a sudden I look up and I see, I'm like, man, that's a log, And I'm like, that's not a log, that's a belly. And the rest is history. I get up on him and was just overcome with joy that I had got my buck. And then I run into, how am I going to get this deer out of here? Everybody's working or hunting. So I put a thing out there on the Facebook group, and this young gentleman from Tennessee who was actually hunting a lease with his dad, and this 15-year-old kid named Tanner Dotson answered the call, and I said, dude, I'll pay you $100 if you help me quarter this deer up and get him the hell out of here. So that's what happened.
That's pretty badass.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because other than that deer'd still be laying out there in all his glory. But just because by the time I got back with my half of the quarter, and there's no way I was in any kind of shape to get back up in there. And by the way, we didn't get him out until dark that night. I shot him at like 6:44 that morning. And by the time I actually rallied somebody and got out there and got him quartered up and out of there, it was dark. So,
yeah, epic story though, epic memories for sure.
Yep.
So you're talking about all where you're filming all this. So where can the listeners find all this film?
So, I just kind of started for fun filming, and a lot of it is when I like the shots. You'll be like I use a lid cam because I don't really like. I've never been really good at the self filming with the camera arm, and I've also found that if I got to pack the camera arm and the camera and everything, and I end up not even taking it. So I use the lid cam. It's a really good HD point of view cam, but it does have its limitations like any point of view cam. When you get into, it doesn't zoom. And if you get into anything where you have some really thick brush or grass, it can be a little bit harder to see, but it does the job for the close up, shots in the woods. So, but I started a thing called Good Sit Productions, and you can find it on YouTube. You can go to Facebook, check it out. I try to keep posting videos pretty regular. I'm going to transition from hunting videos into mobile stand kind of gear how-tos and stuff. Like any public land mobile guy, I'm a gear nut, so I like watching other guys' videos on what they are running and little things that you can do to tweak the equipment. Because honestly, probably more than hunting anymore, I like making my setup as efficient as possible. I spend many hours in the off season sitting there playing with my gear, just trial and error, trying to figure stuff out, what works, what doesn't. And then of course hunting season gets there and you throw about 90% of it out the window and go back to what has always worked. But again, Good Sit Productions. You can find it on Facebook or YouTube.
Nice. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners that'll check it out. We got to watch a couple of your videos. Pretty cool. That Whisker Biscuit video is something to think about. I still shoot a Whisker Biscuit. I'm thinking about upgrading next year, but it's just so consistently what I've used, and I'm real big on not changing what works for me, you know what I mean? And I'm not really a gear nut, I wouldn't say. I just get what works, what kills, and I go with there. But, hey, man.
Well, let me expand on that, though. So I switched to a QAD drop away. Actually, it was a QAD style, but it was a fuse. Hughes had just put their brand on the QAD drop away, and it was like $130 rest. And so I switched. I finally switched, right? And the very first time I went out in the woods with it, it was more in an urban setting with deer that really weren't anywhere near as pressured as like the public that I usually chase. And some does came over the hill at 70 yards. I go to grab my bow, and my thumb just barely smacks the thing that releases the release. And I even had quiet fleece on my shelf, my bow shelf. And the thing just smacks down and makes a little bit of a tap, just enough for them does to look up, look over, and not boogie out of there, but just decide instead of heading towards me, they was going to head the other way. And I was like, you know what? I've never, ever had the whisker biscuit scare away a single deer, right?
No, it's pretty stellar. It's pretty ninja.
And so I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me. And so instantly went back up to the bow shop, said, take this POS off of my bow, put the old whisker biscuit back on, and let's get back to it. So
yeah, you can't. It's hard to break what works, man. That's what I always say, man. If something works, it's hard to break the gear apart, and every year try something new. But hey, man, we appreciate you coming on and telling your public land story this year. It's pretty epic, man. I hope for many more for you. I know you're putting in the work and time and stand to get it done. So I'm sure you'll get some of our listeners to watch your videos. Like I said, we've enjoyed a couple of them, and we're going to keep trying to get out there on some public land ourselves. We're not bucked out like you are. So,
well, yeah, I keep telling myself I'm going to get out there and shoot a doe, and it's a beautiful Sunday. I should be out there, but instead I'm painting my daughter's room because that's what makes Mama happy. And if you want to get somebody to help out during rutcation, you got to do what they say the rest of the year, right?
That's right, man. Well, we won't hold you up anymore. We appreciate you spending some time with us, and have a happy Christmas, or Merry Christmas, and Happy Holiday. How about murdered that? All right, man.
Yeah. Hey, buddy. It was good talking to you guys. Have a good one.
Man, I really enjoyed this episode. Great tactics. Got us thinking a little bit about some stuff that we need to change up. We were just talking. We need to do the move, man. We were thinking a couple times this year where when you got all the camera guy gear in there, you got the camera guy with you, 2 stands. Are you going to make that move? But we were just thinking, like, what were we waiting for them to come back to? You know what I mean? But we still seen deer movement. We still seen bucks. It wasn't the right bucks. But if we would have been another 150 yards,
you never know.
We've been there. So it's always that thing, like, am I going to bump these deer out if I move? And that's always the question you have. But when you have a limited amount of days, I feel like you just got to do it. So that's something I really took away from this episode. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope, like I said, it's still season, man. There's still time. I know a lot of people are like, just like you said, second shotgun, it's over. I still got bucks daylighting on cam. I just can't kill them. So there is that. I've been hunting fairly decently hard on the weekends. When you go back to work, man, it's hard to do when it gets dark at 4:45. You get off at 4. you ain't got nothing. So, but special shout out to Exodus Trail Cams, Morel Targets. Try to get out there, leave a legacy, and Whitetail Legacy's out.